Justin Vaïsse, Director General of the Paris Peace Forum. Great to see you as always here at the AI Action Summit. So this is the third summit of its kind, of course, the first one in the UK in 2023, Seoul, Korea last year. Why was it so important that France host this one and that it be in the EU?
I guess it came largely from a wish, or from a, I would say even more than that, a will or a conviction by President Macron that France had something to bring, not just in terms of AI, with some of the companies being in France, in the European ecosystem, the very vibrant ecosystem in Paris, but also because in terms of diplomacy, there was this idea that France had a role to play in convening and, I would say, gathering a larger group of countries and players and actors than what had been done either in Bletchley Park or in Seoul. In particular from the Global South, and that's why the summit is co-chaired by Prime Minister Modi and India. But also, if you look, you'll see lots of African colleagues, African representatives and others. And so I think that came from that conviction that France has a sort of special message in AI, like on other issues.
We're going to hear tomorrow from US Vice President J.D. Vance. He's on his first official trip abroad in this role. He's expected to say European regulation is just too strict and challenging for the business environment, particularly for technology companies. Is that message resonating here?
Well, certainly not in the sense that J.D. Vance would like, I'm afraid. So probably I would not be looking for a sort of compliant or nice response to that, because there's a very strong sense in Europe that yes, the US is ahead in the race for AI. There's the AI China opening, but at the same time, since this is going to determine part of our lives, and we have been pretty open about our data, about our markets, it's been a wonderful sort of ground for US tech companies to operate and make profits from, then we certainly have a right to regulate, which has been done with the AI Act, and we certainly not let the tech companies sort of run wild, if you'd like, here. And I think that what has happened in Washington for the past 2 weeks, more or less, reinforces that conviction that the sort of slightly disorganized and chaotic processes of executive orders, etc. And so the idea that we need a consistency on that, we need to have a polite and frank debate with the US, but that the pressure exercised either through tariffs or potentially, nothing has been announced yet, but we know it might be coming, or through other types of pressure will probably just strengthen the resolve of the Europeans. So I would say expect a polite but frank and sometimes abrasive discussion, but certainly not the Europeans folding up after J.D. Vance has spoken.
I'm curious, the first two were called safety summits. This one is called an action summit. Does that signify a shift in how policymakers are thinking about AI?
So there are two different things here. One is the reason it veered away from the AI safety summit was the feeling, and I think largely justified, at least up until a couple of weeks before the Bletchley Park summit, that the large international gathering had been sort of too focused or even captured by people who were perhaps a bit excessively worried about existential risk. And so AI safety summit really, for many people, meant AI existential risk summit. And it's not by far the only challenge that we have from AI. And indeed, there are so many others that the feeling was we need to have this international gathering, speak about governance, regulation, etc., for many other issues than the existential risk, which might or might not exist, needs to be taken into account, but certainly not sort of occupies the whole field of the concerns we should have. AI and labor, AI and culture and copyright, etc., AI in the public interest, AI and environment and the necessity to produce, etc. So there's the feeling on the part of the organizers that it was necessary to do a course correction and do this AI Action Summit. Then at the same time, and that's the second point, I think Europeans are indeed getting worried, and I think that's very true for President Macron, that we've been perhaps a bit too fast in regulating AI before developing it enough, at least developing it enough on European soil. And so yes, there might be some kind of a course correction. We'll see tomorrow what the president says, how it, let's say, how it flies with the other leaders. But you're right on that. There's the feeling that perhaps we've been a bit too far and a course correction is needed.
A couple of big announcements from President Macron ahead of this summit, more than 100 billion euros of investment for AI, a partnership with the UAE on a data center. Is this the revival of European competitiveness in tech?
Yeah, I think so, and it's public and private. More than 100 billion, it's both public and private, and so there's also public money, which is important for some critical sectors. I would say, obviously it's not the 500 billion of Stargate, but at the same time, even before we had the DeepSeek sort of breakthrough, right? So it was a couple of days, like two or 3 days before, we knew that the Stargate announcement was, I mean, there was the feeling, and it was just a bit over the top, that yeah, it's really important to put in a lot of computing power, a lot of chips, etc. But isn't there some kind of a bubble here? Do we really need all these sort of brute force to pierce the frontier of innovation? And so there was the feeling that yeah, we are clearly overwhelmed by the magnitude of this investment, and at the same time they're really necessary. And then 3 days after came DeepSeek, which sort of reopened the game, right, and demonstrated that in effect, all what the top frontier American companies did is wonderful, but perhaps you don't need that. It's a regular cycle of innovation, but it's really important politically because it reopens the field not just for the Chinese, but also for the Europeans to sort of use that breach and be able to construct their own ecosystem and field of innovation in AI in ways that are accessible. 100 billion is a lot of money, private and public, and I think it will be put to good use, especially after the DeepSeek breakthrough.
Tomorrow we'll see the Chinese vice premier, the US vice president, leaders from India, the EU, gathered here in the hopes of coming to some sort of voluntary commitment on AI governance. In this fractured political landscape, is consensus possible?
It's a tough question because it depends on the field. You know, many people compare AI with electricity, right? So it's really difficult because the challenges and the problems we are facing are of very different natures and very varied. But basically, let me give you an example. So just an hour ago, we launched a coalition on AI and children, because we know that our children will live in a very different world from ours, not just because of technology in general, but specifically because of AI. Because they will live in a world, they will be surrounded by chatbots, they will be surrounded by toys that are intelligent and that are interacting differently with them. Their cognitive, their social, their affective development will be different from ours because they live in a world of AI. And for that coalition, we assembled the private sector, public actors, so governments, international organizations like UNICEF, obviously, and NGOs and foundations. And we are also working with the Chinese, with the Indians and others, because that problem knows no border, right? And so it's possible on some of these issues to agree. Now, if the question is on the big picture of global governance, can we really get to an agreement? I would say to some extent. I mean, we saw last year the UN resolution that was co-sponsored by China and the US, so there's hope, right? How far can it go? And more importantly, can it be sufficiently granular and precise so that issues like AI in military systems, AI in some of the identification system, privacy, etc., can be agreed upon by the great powers? On that, the jury is still out. It's going to be a very tall order given the geopolitical tensions.
Your organization, the Paris Peace Forum, played a big role in this summit, bringing along 50 different projects from around the world, AI for good on things like climate change, humanitarian assistance, education. What excites you the most right now about the benefits of AI?
I guess it's the acceleration of some of the technological breakthroughs that we saw. So just a moment ago, I was with the minister and we visited one of the projects. And this project has automatized and has been using AI, starting with satellite images of ships in order to detect which ships had sort of an abnormal course just by satellite, and automatizing this so that they could detect either illegal fishing or and then of course crossing these data with others, with other data sets, or using getting rid of fuel. I don't know what the English expression is, but getting rid of fuel in the high seas, which is extraordinarily damaging for the high seas, for the sea, but goes very often undetected. And so they were automatizing this through AI. It was sort of a system that worked well and that will bring, if not impunity, at least transparency on what ships are doing, which ships when, and will pave the way to a better stewardship of the oceans. So I'm sort of giving this very precise example, but I think it's exemplary of the acceleration of technology that we've seen, and whether it's for medicine, education, and education is a great promise, or other things, I think we live in a fantastic age. We just have to face a few challenges, and that is being done. But I think the glass is really half full rather than half empty, because the promises are many, and I think we should just go on and accelerate.
Justin Vaïsse, thanks so much for stopping by.
Thanks, Tony. Thanks.
Thank you.